Hello, everybody. So we are back today for another career and spirituality conversation. So for those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Julie Pone, and I support spiritual seekers having career experiences to reconcile what they do for a living with who they are as a soul. And to support you in this journey, I have a wonderful guest today, Melia. Hi, Ashlyn. How are you today?
Hi, Julie. I'm great. Thank you.
So Ashlyn is a personal and professional coach with who trained with a specialization in neuroscience. So I think we're going to have some interesting conversation around this. But before we launch into your own career journey and your relationship to spirituality, let's just do our usual 1-2 minutes grounding. So for those of you who are listening and can have been a quiet space with your eyes closed, do that. Otherwise, like, don't put yourself in any trouble while you're driving or something like that. So on these words, whenever you're ready, just close your eyes and just feel the weight of your body for a moment, the weight of your body wherever you're standing or sitting, the weight of your feet on the ground, the weight of your feet on the earth. You can press your feet on the ground for a second to acknowledge your connection to the earth. And then bringing your attention and focus back up into the area of your chest. And in the middle of your chest, connecting with the heart. Maybe you can hear your heart or feel your heart. And as you're connecting with it, just imagine as if your breath is flowing in and out directly through it. And for a few breaths, let's just breathe a little bit deeper and a little bit slower than we usually do. So let's do about 5 breaths. Okay, wonderful. So for everyone, whenever you're ready, bringing yourself back in the here and now and opening your eyes. And ta-da! Welcome back. Welcome
Thanks,
again.
Julie. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us your time, Ashlyn. I really appreciate it. So, Ashlyn, I'm gonna start with the spirituality question. So I'm curious about your relationship to spirituality. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the main reasons I thought would be really nice to talk to you today, because it's one of those, it's a very personal, for me, it's a personal relationship, and it's one probably don't share it that often with others. So it's really nice to do that. So I think we'd spoken before, and I think we were kind of on the same page. I think there was a time in my life where I didn't have a spiritual relationship. I was very much kind of, it just wasn't part of my life. And I kind of felt like, we're born and we die and that's the end of it. And so that was fine. And then I think there's probably there's probably a point, you know, I think in my life where I was kind of, probably my mental health was starting to suffer a little bit. So I decided I'd do a couple of counselling sessions, and a lovely lady who I was working with at the time, she recommended a book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you read it. So I don't think I read it at the time, but I think I bought it anyway, and I put it on the bookshelf. And so I think, so eventually I did read it, and I was like, and I think I wasn't reading it because I kind of, it's a spiritual book, and I was just like, it's not really for me. But I started reading it, and I was like, oh, this actually is kind of really resonating with me. It's not really about religion, or it's just about, I suppose, our experience on Earth and our existence. And I was like, oh, that's okay, this is resonating. And I think it really, it kind of, it just opened up the whole concept of spirituality for me. It just made it a lot more open and fluid. And then I had been doing a little bit of yoga, and I was like, oh, this really this kind of lines with a lot of the stuff I do in yoga and how I enjoy that. And I've been kind of going to yoga, but I hadn't really been listening to anything that my teacher was saying. I was just kind of like, okay, I'll do what I'm told. But then I was like, oh yeah, I like this whole concept of we're all one. And so it was very kind of slow relationship. It was kind of little things where I was doing stuff, and this, I suppose, awareness was just starting to emerge, and things were all starting to kind of drop into place. And so yeah, once you kind of see that, you kind of can't really turn back. And then I think at the time I never did science in school, but I just kind of had started to kind of take a bit of an interest in physics and reading books and about that. And this is like, it's about 10 or 15 years ago. So just even reading things about energy can't be created or destroyed, these kind of concepts, I was like, oh, that kind of, you know, all these things were kind of lining up together. So, you know, I used to kind of, you know, not when my yoga teacher might be like, you know, we're all one, we're connected to the source. I'd be like, all right, yeah, that's fine. But I was kind of like, oh, you know, maybe, you know, so that was then. And I think ever since then, I suppose, it just kind of started a journey of, I suppose for me, that relationship, spirituality is a lot about understanding who you are and, you know, being your authentic self and all that kind of thing. So all of these things contribute to that. And it's just, and then I suppose as time has gone on, like it's generally been a personal thing that I've, you know, tried to work on internally. And then as time has gone on, you know, I feel like when I go to my yoga class, I feel like it's a very group spiritual experience. And I feel like I'm celebrating, and not that, like, I don't have an alignment to any particular tradition. I'll kind of I can go into a mass and have a listen, and something will resonate, and it'll kind of form and influence my spiritual, the spiritual kind of experience that I have. And then recently, or in the last few years, I've been attending Moon Manaw circles. So that's really drawing on a lot of ancient Celtic wisdom, and I've really that's really fueled my kind of spiritual well-being as well. So I find that, so I feel like there's no kind of, I don't align with any particular tradition. I just feel like I have my spirituality is something very personal, and I love going into different groups and seeing what's shared. So yeah, that's where I am now. And then, you know, I like, there's another Richard Rohr, like, he'd be a Catholic kind of writer and priest, and like I recently read his book and I got a lot from that. You know, he spoke about passages from the Bible which I wouldn't have a clue, you know, but I still felt he had a lot of things to say that were really interesting, and that kind of enriched my kind of spiritual experience. So yeah, it's like that. It's an ongoing relationship that's changing and evolving over time. So yeah.
No, I totally relate to that. So you came from a very neutral no expectation, no prejudice, and anything that sort of resonated with you, you're just taking on board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's all about, you mentioned, you made me laugh and said, oh yeah, the yoga teacher would say, oh yeah, connecting to source, and I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And then eventually it grows on, because I was the same, I would hear some things that sounded a bit spiritual, and at a stage in my life, it would be going like way over my head. And years later, after such book or this, a person talking to me, suddenly things start to click into place. I was like, oh, now I understand that from that time. So yeah, and the connecting to source, like it resonates with, you said, like it's about knowing ourselves or connecting, finding who we really are. So that's to me it sounds like different ways to say the same thing or come to the same personal exploration and self-discovery. And so speaking of self-discovery, what has your career journey now, how has it contributed to your self-discovery? So where did you start from, and what led you to be a coach now?
Yeah, so it's I think it's really nice when you're at a point where you can look back and it can all make a lot more sense for you. And at the time, like, my journey is quite meandering now, so you'll have to bear with me. But I'm glad, like, now I really own that story and I'm really happy about it. But so I did an arts degree in sociology and Irish, and I think that was what I did finally. So and the sociology piece, I don't think I even left college really understanding what sociology was about, but I knew I kind of enjoyed it. But I think at the time I wished maybe I'd had the option for psychology. I was like, I want to do something about people, but I didn't. But so that kind of was the one topic that seemed to resonate. And then the Irish was something that I'd kind of enjoyed in school, so I kept that up. So then I was like, okay. I remember I was on a train speaking to someone, and she was like, I'm going into HR. And I was like, oh, HR, what's that about? And she's like, human resources. And I was like, oh, humans. Yeah, I like humans. And so I was like, yeah, maybe that would be a good choice for me. So, and that was really what, like, I come from a family where, like, my dad's a farmer, and, like, really sitting about your career wasn't something that we did, or so I did a postgrad in business and human resources, and then I kind of went to a recruitment agency to see if I could get a job. And so while I was there, the guy interviewing me was like, oh, would you be interested in recruitment? And I was like, oh, maybe, yeah, like, it's part of HR. So I decided, I was like, maybe I'll do this for a couple of years and then I'll go in-house and work in-house in HR. So I did it for a couple of years and I really enjoyed it. I think it ticked a lot of boxes for me in terms of meeting new people, interviewing people, getting to know them, supporting them in kind of their career journey. And I really enjoyed the sales element to it at the time as well. Like, I found it stressful, but I also kind of got a kick out of it. So I worked in recruitment for a good few years, and then, there was various buyouts and this, that, and the other. And yeah, it just didn't, I never felt called to go back into kind of in-house HR roles.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was fine. And then the recession, I think 2009 happened, and which naturally wasn't a good time to be in recruitment. And so I had the option to take redundancy or kind of weather the storm in recruitment. And I was kind of around 30 at the time, and I'd had ambitions to travel. So I was like, right, I need to change my career. I was like, I need something that is more recession proof. I need, and these were my needs at the time. And I'd probably approach it a bit differently if I was to do it again, but that was where I was at the time. So I was like, I want something I can travel with. I want something that's recession proof, and that I think I'll enjoy. So I had like, and again, it's funny because you can remember specifically the moments where you were like, ah. And I was on my bike cycling down through Rathmines, and I remember having this moment going, oh, I think I should be a primary school teacher, because I have Irish, and and I enjoy education and teaching and learning. I always enjoyed school, and there was also a piece where, like, although I liked recruitment, sometimes I felt judged about being in that role. Because anytime I meet someone, they always have they were like, oh God, this time I went to a recruitment consultancy and I had this terrible experience. And I always felt a little bit ashamed of my role. If I was doing it now, I wouldn't care what anyone thinks. But at the time, I always felt a bit embarrassed about it. And also, like, if I'm really honest, I was like, oh yeah. And people really respect primary school teachers, so people would really respect me way more. So I was like, this is the perfect option. So I trained as a primary school teacher, and that was trained, and I was lucky, knew how to get a job. So I was like, where will I go? I actually had done German in first year in college, so I went to Germany and worked in an international school there. I really loved the whole international school environment. And yeah, so I was working there 2 years, but I'd say in the second year, and I knew actually towards the end of the first year, I could really feel my mental health slipping. And I kind of didn't pay attention to it because I was like, I'm living the dream. Got my own apartment in this lovely city in Germany. And I just didn't, I was like, I've no reason to be not feeling brilliant. So I kind of didn't pay attention. And then towards the second year, I was like, okay, I really need to do something about this. So I did a bit of counselling while I was over there, but I think I just didn't have resources. I didn't have family, my network. When I look back at it now, it's easy to see I didn't have enough balance in my life to kind of push through. So
what was missing that you didn't realize at the time?
Let me see. I think a little bit of, I was living in a town that was, it was a university town, and there probably wasn't a huge amount. I was going dating and things like that, but there's very limited options. So I felt like I wanted to meet someone, and that I was doing my best, but that wasn't happening really. And so I was probably 32 at the time, so I was like feeling the pressure. And then what else was, I didn't have my family and friends around. I had some really amazing friends there who I still I'm in touch with, but it's that environment where everybody is nobody has their networks around them, and so you need to be quite resilient. So I felt like, I just didn't have a support network. And
there was an imbalance between professional. Oh, sorry, the sound. I didn't hear what you.
Yeah, so looking back, I feel like, I probably didn't have. Well, I suppose I was looking for a balance in my life, so I wanted to meet someone that was struggling with that. So that was probably out of balance. Then there was that kind of social and activities piece, which probably wasn't as many. It was, I suppose I'd gone into a new job, and there was a little bit of burnout because I was like gone into a new job, doing a job that I wasn't really trained for because it was a different curriculum. Building a whole new life for myself. I was there 2 years, but I lived in 3 different apartments. So it was just a lot of huge amount of change. And I just didn't have enough to fuel me up to get through it. And not understanding, I suppose, how I need to be fueling myself emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. So it was just running on empty.
That's a very good point. Like, you not knowing how you function, how you needed to be fueled.
Yeah,
that's important for people to hear. Do we actually know what
Yeah.
because it sounded like you thought that the ambition, going to a different country, all of these things were going to be fueling you. And to some extent, it sounded like you had ticked the professional box, what you thought was like the dream. But underneath it, there were some huge gaps that were not, or needs that were not being met.
Yeah. And and that's it. And I think that was a huge learning experience. And I totally understand now, being a life coach, how everything, you need to be taking care of all these elements to get through the challenges. So yeah, that's probably the biggest learning I've had, probably bigger than a course. It's really having that lived experience of trying to get through a big challenge, but not knowing how to fuel yourself to get through it. So so that was Germany. So eventually I was like, I need to go home and just reset. So I went home, and then I kind of was like, I got home, and at the time there wasn't really many teaching jobs, and I actually had a mortgage. Like, I'd had people renting my house, and I was like, I really need, like, I was still just 2 years teaching, so I was like bottom of the pay. The pay rank, or however it works. So I was like, right, I need to pay my mortgage, I need to pay my bills, and I want to have a nice life living in Dublin. So I was like, I'm gonna have to go back into recruitment. So I did that, and then very quickly, so that was so this is very long. I told you my career journey is quite long. But so went back into recruitment, and that suited my needs for the time. And then I was home in January, and by October I met my now husband. So I was able to sort that out.
So that was a good call to go home.
Yeah. So in hindsight, it all made sense, but it was very difficult at the time, so yeah, there was a lot of counseling and soul searching and all sorts. And so then I had my daughter Ruth. That was in 2017. So I went back to recruitment. I had her, and I suppose my plan was like, oh yeah, I'll have 2 kids, and I can probably just stay in recruitment. It'll be more difficult having a family, but that was kind of my rough plan. So,
how did you feel about recruitment then?
I was feeling the pressure because, it was like, it's a sales-driven environment. So as a single person, I'd be like, okay, I'm not close to my targets this month, so I'll work late and I'll do what I have to do. Whereas once you have kids, I was like, I can't work late. I don't, you're like, do I work late and reach the target, or do I go pick up my daughter at, 4:30 instead of 6 or whatever? And, it's not that was, my values had changed, my priorities had changed. So I was starting to feel the conflict. But I suppose you're kind of busy, so you don't really have the capacity to kind of change anything about it. So then 2 years later, I was pregnant again. And so I hadn't really anticipated huge changes. Maybe in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, maybe I'll go in-house. But I was, I was like, I'll kind of see how I go. And because sometimes I felt like I'm familiar with this environment, so maybe I'm better to stick with what I know and I'm familiar with. So then I had a surprise of twins. And so that was like, so I was like, whoa, this is complete game changer. So I had to move house, I had to get a new car. And I was like, I think I'm gonna have to get a new job as well. So I was like, I just can't see how I can spend the amount of time that I want to spend with my kids and also fulfill the commitments I have at work. So eventually I handed in my notice at work, and I cried for about a week. It was such a tough thing to do because I suppose it was such a big part of my identity. And then so I was busy raising the twins, and probably once they hit about 18 months, I was kind of starting to think, right, I need to just get start putting something in place to kind of have something to return to at some point. So yeah, this is near, it's still going. We'll get there in a minute. And so we so I was talking to a friend who'd had twins as well, and she had done this life coaching course. And so I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I was like, right, well, what that could do for me is just to give me another outlet, but give me an opportunity to make a new plan in terms of my career. And so I looked into the course and I loved all the content and the book list. I was like, I've read that book, and it just was really talking to me. Like I've always had an interest in like neuroscience and just personal development in general. Like, you know, so Eckhart Tolle was on the reading list, and there was plenty of other, you know, Brené Brown, people who I'd just been kind of reading in my spare time for fun. And so I was like, okay, I think I'm going to really enjoy this course. So I did it, and I did really enjoy it. And then once I actually, and I think like any coach will tell you, until you learn about coaching, you have no idea what coaching is about. Like I would have thought that coaching is like mentoring or consulting, or like I thought you'd sit there and you'd advise people what to do. I had no idea that it really what coaching is holding space to allow people to find the answers for themselves, and trusting that they are resourceful and whole and they've got all the answers. So when I did the course, I was like, oh, this is really resonating with me and my whole spiritual journey. So I was like, God, this is actually, it feels like a spiritual practice more so than a, you know, a professional practice. So I was like, oh, that's exciting. And then when I thought about the parts that I loved about recruitment, I love meeting with people, you know, asking questions, getting to know them, and supporting them kind of in a journey. It just felt like it all made sense in terms of what gave me meaning, purpose, and like it aligned with my strengths, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I graduated in 2020, and then since have been kind of working on building my business as a coach. And yeah, so I've just really been enjoying it and feel like you know, it's like it's definitely challenging. It's the sort of thing that you go into, and it's not like doing a course where here's the content, learn it and regurgitate it for an exam. It's like I think one of my lecturers she kind of used the analogy of you're a jar, and you shake the jar and everything goes everywhere, and then you have to bring everything back and put it back into place where you want it to be. And like I definitely felt doing that course, it was just so it was a great course. It was very tough in terms of it really like pulled you apart and put you back together again. So yeah, so that's where I am now.
I love that, and yeah, I can relate to that. It's more than, it's not just learning a skill or a knowledge. It's
Yeah.
it applies, the skill is applied on us.
Yeah.
In order for us to have that experience. It's a personal development journey for ourselves as much as learning a new skill.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. It is, and that's it every day. Like, and to be the best coach, you have to keep developing yourself, and you can't stop. And I suppose there's a win-win. It's you get to kind of follow your own kind of spiritual path whilst supporting people in, and it mightn't necessarily be a spiritual experience for them. It's just a process, and they need to get from A to B, and that's totally fine. But yeah, and it's yeah, so it's, I think you're like that. It's a piece where I'm kind of in a place now where my career and my kind of spiritual experience are kind of are intersected, and maybe they always have been, but now I'm aware of it.
Yeah, I like that. And so, you know, in that process that your teacher described as getting out of the, you know, everywhere and then back in place, what was your biggest maybe realization, or is there something that stands out for you that was really a revelation in that whole journey?
Yeah, God, there was so many. Like, it was really. I when I pick one, I'm probably like reflect and go. I think, yeah, there was a lot of. I suppose there was a piece about there's a legacy exercise that I suppose I did and I do with a lot of my clients, and it's really that part where you imagine yourself kind of close to the end of life and you look back and you think, what impact do I want to have and who do I want to have it on? And I just felt like that perspective just really, it's just very transformative. It just makes you think, it just kind of brings you down to the reality of what really is important to you. Who do I want to impact and what impact do I want to have on them? And that doesn't you don't necessarily have to be a coach to fulfill that. You can do it in any role, but it's just understanding, I want to be able to impact my kids. So it doesn't really matter what job you're doing, but as long as you're connected to the meaning and purpose. So that was that piece, just in terms of using new perspectives to look at things. It just helped reframe a lot for me, and then as well, having your personal definition of success, really nailing that down. I think I've been living my life kind of according to society's perception of what success is. But I hadn't really thought about what's my version of success, and that was so much broader than my job, which just was really just felt a bit liberating.
Yeah. Is it indiscreet to ask you what it is? How is it? Yeah, what's success for you now compared to just like a job and status or whatever from society?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I think I haven't looked at it, but I remember I looked at it before, and it was around. It was, I suppose it was my kids and my clients, and so they were all. I couldn't leave my kids out, but it's about helping them reach, like, being happy and fulfilled and content. So for me, success is when I'm whatever I'm doing is contributing to that.
Yeah. So it's like because I think it nearly also makes sense in our spiritual journey that there is a first phase where success is nearly for ourselves, and then at some stage there is a switch, and success is when we're contributing to other people's success.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me.
It's and I suppose you get a lot from that.
And now that you're working, so sorry, first of all, because I know you're working also in the career and workplace space. So primarily, who are the people you're impacting with the coaching?
So really broad, diverse group of people. Like typically, so like I worked with people who work in academia, private sector, public sector, and generally it's mainly been people who are kind of working in the professional environment, like not like people who have started working or are on that kind of working journey. So not so much like students or that that sector. So it's really people who are they come with all sorts of, like, each and every person comes with a unique goal and mission, and that can evolve and change along the way. And it's like very often wherever, and I'm sure it's the same for you, where we arrive is never where you imagined they were going to get. We're both in this kind of journey together, and I'm just the one who's holding the space, asking the questions, and bringing some tools and techniques that are useful, but just holding that space to allow someone to work it out for themselves.
But you mean they're not it might not be specifically, someone might come in with maybe a career question, but then once the space is open, it could go anywhere. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and that's it. It's I think usually whatever's getting in the way is getting in the way in all parts of your life. It's not just a career issue. It's it eventually comes to the surface.
Yeah, because I'm also quite curious about what's so having been in recruitment and now seeing people possibly who have, like, a very deep, strict maybe career issue. Like what's the difference in dealing with people from the coaching, like with your coaching hat or with a recruiter hat? Do you even see things differently? Can you tell us about
yeah, like I remember one of the main questions like I used to ask in recruitment would be like, and this was from training from my boss at the time, but what are the three most important things to you? So we'd always be like, okay, you'd always have to understand what's the three most important things. So it might be location, our flexibility, our all those types of things. And so this is probably drawing a similarity maybe that I hadn't really picked up at the time. But I suppose now when I'm in coaching, that would be you're working out what people's values are, your core values. And so this was even though I wasn't really aware of it, I was trying to work out people's core values and align their role with their core values. So that's probably a similarity. So you were asking me about difference, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, anything that comes to your mind about the.
Yeah. So that with differences is, I suppose, like there was probably a piece of, like there's always a piece of kind of gaining trust. I suppose more so when you're a recruiter, like you do have when you're in the coaching space, you're there 100% for that person. But I suppose in recruitment, I'm serving my client, I'm serving my my candidate, and I'm also serving my employer. So you're kind of you're serving three people at the same time, and you're trying to balance that and do the best by everyone. So I suppose what's nice in coaching is that you're serving one person, your client, and it's undivided attention, and that's definitely a part that is a lot more fulfilling.
And in your experience as a recruiter, do you find it that it's supporting how you coach, or it's supporting your clients? Are you bringing some of that into how you're helping people now?
Yeah, definitely. I think just I would have had a lot of experience, I suppose, sitting, like, interviewing people, holding that space. So that was, and also, like, I suppose just even on a practical level, like typically as a coach, I don't advise or give guidance, but sometimes I'll have contacts because I have a huge network. So that I can connect people up. So it's probably something that probably diversifies my service a little bit. I'll connect people with contacts or mentors or that kind of thing. So it's really supported me in that way. And just in terms of, I suppose, knowing how to understanding and sometimes you don't necessarily have to understand what the client is talking about to be able to help them or to help them move forward, but probably maybe gives my clients a bit of comfort that I have a good sense of the work place, the structures that they're working in, the different industries. Like I've had a lot of exposure to all that over the years, so it kind of I suppose it might give them comfort, but I know probably it's not hugely necessary. I just what's most important is that I can sit and listen properly and support them in kind of getting where they need to get.
I guess it's easier for you to understand where they're coming from, I guess.
A little bit. Yeah, and that's probably would come across in my demeanor because I can, I'm familiar with what they're saying, and about.
And so, if you don't mind me asking, are you, what main challenges, especially related to professional and career, issues, what are you seeing emerging, in the last, like a couple of months, with the pressure of, well, at least in Ireland, it's difficult to find accommodation, and the prices and inflation and all of this. What do you find as patterns right now emerging in your coaching practice, and especially in the career space?
A lot of it is balance, just people finding balance and just recalibrating. So just a lot of, I suppose, with life changes, people are just like, and a lot of it is maybe having new families and understanding, okay, how can I find the right balance now? So that there's a lot of that. And then there's also just a lot of managing big conversations, like big, say, buyouts in companies, and just managing very significant changes internally in the business. So that's something that people probably need to do more at the moment than they might have had to before, and being kind of looking ahead and seeing where are they now, where do they want to be, what do they need to do to get there, really kind of giving themselves peace of mind that they've considered all these things and can see what are, potential, or what are they fearful of, and kind of working through that stuff. In terms being in the workplace, it's either external or internal conflicts that are coming up. So it's just whatever the topic changes, and then so it's either something external that we're dealing with, or internal. And internal generally comes up, when someone is maybe, they're like, I'd love to have more patience at work, or I'd love to, so they really enjoy their job, but they're just, the feedback I'm getting is that I need to be a bit more patient, a bit less controlling, and then that's the internal work, so I think the topics maybe are slightly changing, but it's either external or it's internal, and it'll be both. So it will be both, but the pressures, that's where they're coming from. So and it could be just depending on who I've been coaching in the last few months, but it hasn't been, the economy isn't coming up a huge amount. It's just the significant changes, I suppose, but maybe the economy's pushing that.
Okay. Are you working primarily with online or in person, and is it more people in Ireland or internationally?
Yeah, mainly online. Sometimes, like, I do have clients who are like, I can't do another Zoom call, so, and I get that. And I do have clients international as well. Like, I suppose just the nature of being a teacher, I've worked with teachers in international schools, in the Pacific, and really all far-flung places. Yeah. Expats, so it could be Irish people who are living abroad but just want to be coached by an Irish person, or just an English speaking person.
And so, and you were talking about internal, external, and external would be something as like I don't get on well with a colleague or something like that, right?
Yeah, or it could be, my company has been taken over, and really just checking back in, what are my core values, how is this going to impact, what changes do I need to make to get through this, so it's really just helping people be as secure in themselves as possible to navigate those big changes.
Yeah. And I know that you train, like, an aspect of your coaching training was specifically, coaching with neuroscience. So can you tell us a little bit about that part? How does neuroscience, what does it have to do with coaching, basically?
So I suppose it comes in so many ways. Like, I suppose, on a basic level, there's changing habits and behaviors. So that's linked to whatever behavior we have is represented with a neural pathway in our brain. So, it's that awareness of that every time you're changing a habit, you're changing a neural pathway, and understanding that it can take a period of time to create new neural pathways, and to also how we can create atrophy. So allowing old neural pathways to die away, old habits. So it's that piece which is all part of coaching, but I suppose understanding the science underneath it. And that's the main part. But then there's also the neurochemistry, so understanding how our systems are activated and cortisol and all these lovely chemicals. Then there's just even pieces like values. I think there's a huge amount of research done around values and how when we are living a life according to our values, all the right parts of our brain are being activated, and we're kind of, you're either you're thriving or you're surviving. So when you're living according to your values, you're thriving and you're operating from your prefrontal cortex, whereas when you're in conflict, you're surviving and you're operating from amygdala or whatever. There's only so much detail you can go into in terms of the brain and all that. So it's just that awareness. I think it just is comforting for me to know that what I'm doing is supported by science, and I wouldn't really bring it to, it depends on the client. If the client is really kind of into that, I'll kind of direct them to a couple of books. So if they're interested, but otherwise it's really just knowing that I'm bringing the latest in kind of coaching to the table.
Yeah. So it's like knowing, it's not just helping people to change what they do, but knowing why we do what we do or why they do what they do. I guess because I see that with stress management, with like I'm using heart math, like the heart coherence, and there is a huge body of research and scientific explanation of why, and I see like some people it doesn't matter at all, it's all about the experience. But then to some people who might be more on the rational or hyper rational side of the spectrum, understanding, having that knowledge of, okay, this is working because there is this chemistry or link between such and such, suddenly it makes a huge difference, as if the logical brain gets on board with doing something that the person would not have naturally been attracted to. I felt that in my spiritual journey, that like the spiritual was, I enjoyed, like you described, and all the books and getting into some of this, the energy of things. But like until I got across some of the science, and physics, metaphysics, and one person in particular who somehow could give an explanation of why these energy things we're talking about in the spiritual field are actually real, and maybe they just haven't been explained fully yet, but there is a science base to it. Then suddenly I could do what I do now, and talk about spirituality. Otherwise I would never have been able to. Both sides of my brains were not on board. So
and that's it. It's that integration of the left and right sides of your brain, and that's I think, is it Dan, oh gosh, he's a big psychologist, but anyway, he was a big part of the course, and like all his kind of techniques that he uses just feel so spiritual, but they're completely and utterly rooted in like such detailed science. It was helpful for me, but
was it crucial for you to have that, or would you have been okay?
No, I think for me, I just think the science doesn't really matter. I think it's about having the human to human. I think we're wired for connectivity, and we need the time and the space and someone to listen to us with their full attention. And I just think that's the most important part of coaching, and someone who's objective and not judging, and just, I think we all need that at some part of our lives, to just help, just to give us the space to connect with what's really important for us.
Totally agree. Yes, the space, like having that space, holding the space, but that the space is completely clear.
And Yeah, and I think that's what you were saying as well, and that's what our job is, to keep working on ourselves so that we can sit in that space and not be judging and not be, just have it as clear as possible, and to do whatever we can to be that kind of clear presence.
Yeah. And so is there, like, in your studies, and you mentioned a couple of books already along the way, is there some, like, one or two that you would like recommend for people who might be listening to us to understand themselves better, like that have been particularly instrumental for you?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I think The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, that's what I mentioned earlier. That was a big game changer for me. And I think so that was good. And he has a few other books that it kind of help you to practice the power of now. But I like and I but I kind of find that quite difficult to do, to kind of build that practice myself. And then I think it was a few years ago I discovered positive intelligence.
Oh,
And I think that is by Shirzad Sharmin. I think that really, he has come up with this really effective framework to kind of bring all that information from the power of now to kind of practice it in your day-to-day life. And I suppose that book really works for me because he's a psychologist, a coach, a computer scientist. Is bringing all these things together. And like, there's an app so that you can, like, I personally, I don't think it's practical to be relying on an app and having your phone, bring you back to the present moment every few minutes. But I think it's definitely it's good to kind of help you establish a practice.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was useful in terms of bringing the whole teachings of the power of now to life. And then other books that really, that's two. You just asked for two. Those are
Oh, yeah,
good.
no, like anything else.
And I think anything by Brene Brown is just
Oh, yeah.
amazing. Like, yeah, just in terms of understanding that, vulnerability is a good thing and all that kind of stuff. So
Her TED Talks were like so amazingly, yeah,
yeah,
funny as well, and it just, you get hooked to her. So vulnerable in her explanation of vulnerability. Yeah.
yeah. And that's, she calls herself, and I love that as in career, like she calls herself a storyteller, stroke social, or like researcher, stroke, like she's a few labels. And that's something that I often kind of remind people, like, you don't have to you can be lots of things, so yeah, and I think she's really fabulous. And I think everybody should at least read one of her books. Yeah,
I like what you don't have to be stuck in one box. Yeah. And I got to say, because I read, Positive Intelligence as well, and I read The Power of Now like years ago. So I had never connected the two. So now I'm gonna have a completely, a different kind of filter, and I might even go and read back The Power of Now to see the connection. Yes, you're opening up a new perspective here. So thanks for that.
yeah. No, I felt like I was like, oh, this is the missing link. I just felt, and he, I don't know if it's in the book, but he definitely does refer to Eckhart Tolle. So he definitely is leaning a lot on the teachings and that, and just even on, I think, is there a piece there about, well, the situations aren't good or bad, and I think that's something that came across very strongly in The Power of Now. It's just, it is what it is, and you have to not get too caught up in the positives or the negatives. So
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, like the principle that we never know whether something is going to be good or bad. So I guess, and if we're truly in the now, if we are not, it's only by having like a connection to anticipating the future or referring to the past that we're starting to have judgment about how something is gonna could be turning out in one way or another. So yeah, staying in the now allows to stay neutral. So that makes sense. I see the the connection, Ashley.
yeah.
And we are coming to, towards the end of our time together. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would love to address, or anything, any message that you would like people to stay with? Anything?
No, actually, I think I'm always referring. I have a lovely yoga teacher at the moment. Her name is Nuala, and the last couple of classes, like she's always says, it's our job on our job here is to remember who we are, and we have to keep, reminding ourselves of who we are, and that's our job. And I was like, yeah, I totally agree. That's what we have to do, is just keep returning to who we are and doing what we have to do to keep present in ourselves and true to ourselves. So yeah, so it's not my wisdom, borrowed wisdom.
Borrowed wisdom, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and like any wisdom is good wisdom, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like it because it feels like it's also making a full circle, because you mentioned that at the start in the, your relationship to spirituality is about, getting back to ourselves.
Mhm.
So yes, I love it when we are doing
Oh yeah.
when we're at the end, it's
Yeah.
referring back to the start. I think it's a wonderful way to finish our conversation. So Aisling, thank you so much. So I'm gonna make sure to send the links to contact you if anyone wants to get in touch with you on LinkedIn, and anything else that you'll give me for that purpose. And thank you for listening, and rendezvous next week for another conversation.
Great.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.